SampleWiz and Sampler have some similarities, but they have some lovely differences as well. Let's check it out. Here's the basic sample we're working with as heard in SampleWiz. And here it is in Sampler. Okay. With both SampleWiz and Sampler, you basically can put your finger on the waveform, which is really cool. One of the things that SampleWiz does is on the vertical grid, it allows you to have a particular scale. So you can put your finger on the waveform and then move vertically to change the pitch. So you can go up 1 octave, 1.5 octaves, or 2 octaves, kind of like this. So you'd play a note and then you could move it up and down in pitch. In the Sampler app, the vertical grid is assigned to amplitude. You can get some nice expression. SampleWiz has these anchors down at the bottom of its window, and by positioning the anchors, like this is the end anchor over here, this is the start anchor, the loop anchor, you can actually select the amount of time that you want to deal with when your finger touches the waveform. So let's move this in, and you'll notice we can hear it when we move the anchor. So we'll move it in, make it nice and tight, and if you wanted to, in SampleWiz you can zoom in as well. So now we just zoomed into that area where the start and end point were, and we can tighten it up even more, which is pretty cool. Let's say we want it there, and then we'll come out again. And then whenever we press anywhere along the waveform, it'll choose that amount of time. So we're scrolling through the waveform. And you can put as many fingers as you want. And they all can go in different ways. Some can go up in pitch while others are going down. Pretty crazy stuff. In Sampler, you have this very cool EBO mode, which is this one right here. And when you're in EBO mode, you can use this slider to determine the amount of time that your finger will grab on its waveform. So like if I play a note, I can move this slider. You can see the start and end point increase and decrease. So if I tighten it up like that, and then move my finger here, then you're scrolling through the waveform there. And what's cool about this is that it's very smooth. And you can put a few fingers down. I think a maximum is 3 fingers. And again, this does amplitude on the vertical grid. Very nice. A nice feature of SampleWiz is that within the area that you select, you can actually have it do a forward loop, kind of like this. Right? So wherever you press, it'll go from start to end and then go back to the start and end again. Or you can actually do a forward and back loop. So you're going back and forth, and every note you press will do that. So even if the start and end are very close together, it'll do that still. So you can get some different sounds. SampleWiz will also sample. And not only just sample from the microphone, but if you touch this little button, you could sample itself, kind of like this. And then, let's hear our new sample. Fascinating. In Sampler, it divides up your sample in symmetrical values. Like, you could have this particular sample divided up in 4, or maybe in 8. Look at how it's grouped now. And what's cool about that is when you have it in this particular mode up here, when you play a note, it will play that area, or that, or that, or that. And further, what's cool is if you touch this little button here, it'll put markers in the bottom. So let's say this particular marker doesn't land on the beginning of that transient. You can move it over, and then when you play that note, it'll be right on it. Same is true, let's say, for this one. If I move it right here, then, so then when you play the Like that one's not coming in right away, so I could move the marker here. Perfect. And if I move it to like 16 or 32, then all of a sudden I have these 32 different sonic events depending on the sample. Pretty groovy stuff. I really like this tape mode, this one here, because what happens is if you press like in the center, it will hardly move. But if you press to the right, it will play your sample forward faster as you go further to the right, right? Slowing down till it's not moving, and then if you go left of center, it'll start going in reverse. That's cool. Right? Similar to the amplitude vertical grid that you have on Samplr, if you're in SampleWiz and you go to the keyboard mode here, you have that on the keys, so. And it's all independent, just like Samplr, where one note can be louder, then you can move this one up, and every note doesn't have to be at the same point in amplitude. If you're in granular mode on SampleWiz, you can set your grain size and your speed here. And what's cool is, like on the keyboard, if you press a chord, it'll be completely in time and everything will be in sync, even though it's at different pitches. So, right? You can alter your speed. Kind of like that. This mode is the scratch mode. Really, really cool. So you can kind of do the record player type thing on your waveform. Samplr has a keyboard mode you can get to by pressing this button, and it turns the waveform screen into a kind of keyboard. So you can be like, Samplr has a nice effects area up here. You can choose some different things, like this delay. Right. You've got some nice filtering. Kind of filter and resonance on this XY pad. Very nice. You've got this kind of like loudness, amplitude thing, which you can add some nice drive to it. And some amplitude, like stuttering. And now back to SampleWiz. One of the cool things about it is that, you know, classic sampling is kind of like when you have a note, right? And then you play it up higher, and it gets munchkinized, and you play it down low, and it gets very like slowed down. But what people don't know, and what we did is we added this modern mode. Modern mode is cool because you don't even find it in some high-end samplers where you can have a note like, you know, your original. But then if you play it up a fifth, it maintains the time if you played it up an octave. Right? So it maintains exactly the time and it changes your formants. So you could just play, or even like. So with one sample, you're able to keep them all in time and keep your formants intact. It's a pretty cool mode. SampleWiz and Samplr are both based on the art of sampling, and even have some similarities. I recommend to you that you check them both out on the iTunes App Store. I recommend to you that you check them both out on the iTunes App Store. Enjoy.